Swayam Prabha. Digital India. Educated India.
Hello friends, welcome once again to this Unit 2 of our Macroeconomics course. The topic of today's lecture is Goods Market Equilibrium and Understanding the IS Curve. Let us first have the outline of this lecture. In this lecture, we will understand the role of interest rate in the goods market. Then we'll know the meaning of equilibrium in the goods market, and thereafter we will derive the IS curve as well as see that how does this IS curve shifts. Before this, let us have a big picture which I am sure will make you understand that what all are we going to do in this unit. Friends, in the previous lecture, we had explained the Keynesian cross, which was used to determine the equilibrium level of income in short run. Now this Keynesian cross will be used to derive the IS curve. Then we will be seeing in the later parts of the subsequent lectures the theory of the liquidity preference, which will give us the LM curve. Together both of these curves, IS curve and LM curve, is popularly known as the IS-LM model. Then from this IS-LM model, we will be deriving the aggregate demand curve and the aggregate supply curve. And together the aggregate demand curve and aggregate supply curve will give us the model of aggregate demand and aggregate supply. This big picture is a synopsis of what all we are going to do in this complete Unit 2. So friends, let us start today with the very first concept of IS curve. Now friends, previously that we understood that the equilibrium income is determined at a point where the planned expenditure, also known as the ex-ante expenditure, is equal to the ex-post expenditure or the real GDP. Therein we have seen that the consumption function was given such that C is equal to A, that is the autonomous consumption, plus C, that is the marginal propensity to consume, multiplied by Y. That is, we had seen that consumption is dependent on income. And if you can just recall, there we had said that investment and government expenditure, both of these variables were exogenous. That is, they were not getting affected by any of the things. There we had ignored the role of interest rates. In this particular lecture, we will be seeing that how these interest rates play a role in the goods market. So, just again talking about the goods market equilibrium, we had seen that it got established where the planned spending or ex-ante expenditure was equal to real GDP. Then, as we've just mentioned, the effect of interest rates on savings and investment was ignored. But all of us know that the interest rates have a major role to play on how much investment is being done in an economy. So, to get a complete picture, we will be introducing interest rate as a determinant of investment. In order to understand, first of all, we will divide investment into one, autonomous investment, and other is induced investment. We'll just see that what do you mean by these two terms, autonomous and induced. Let us first derive the investment function so that we further understand the autonomous and the induced investment. Investment function is given by capital I is equal to I bar minus B multiplied by R. This investment function, which we had kept exogenous, now we are relaxing this assumption and saying that the investment is also determined by a few things, that is most importantly the rate of interest. So the investment function is given as I bar minus B multiplied by R, where we are saying B is greater than 0. And let us understand these terms. R in this investment function represents the rate of interest. B represents the responsiveness of investment to interest rates. That is, how much does the investment change due to a change in the rate of interest. I bar is the autonomous investment. So as we can see here that the total investment is determined by 1, the rate of interest, but there will also be some level of investment which will be irrespective of what is the rate of interest, it will always remain. So that is called as autonomous investment. We also know that there is an inverse relationship between rate of interest and the level of investment. That is, when the rate of interest increases, the demand for loans or the demand for investment will fall down. Why? Because when investment, see what is rate of interest? Rate of interest is basically the cost of taking that money from the bank as a loan and which we are investing. So when the rate of interest increases, it will become expensive to take a loan and investment will not be as much profitable as it was earlier because the cost of borrowing has increased. Therefore, there is an inverse relationship between the rate of interest and level of investment. Now, let us see this autonomous and induced investment in form of a graph. As you can see that in autonomous investment will remain whatever be the level of GDP. So this I or I bar which we had seen in the investment function will remain constant irrespective of what is the level of GDP. Why? Because in order to work, some minimum level of investment is always required. So autonomous investment will remain constant throughout. Whereas induced investment, as we have just seen, is dependent on the rate of interest and it is inversely related to it. So this green line is showing the induced investment, that is when the rate of interest is more, investment is less. Rate of interest falls, investment increases. So the rate of interest and investment are negatively or inversely related. After understanding the relationship between rate of interest and investment, let us now derive the IS curve. IS curve is basically, if we try to see, this is investment saving curve. Now, equilibrium level of income we have all seen is equal to the planned expenditure and becomes equal to the actual investment. That is where the point of planned income or expenditure becomes equal to the actual expenditure, that is the equilibrium in the goods market we had seen in the previous lecture, whereby your real GDP is actual, it is become equal to planned. But here if you see, we are now also accounting for investment as a function of the rate of interest. So this whole equation, this A plus C into Y minus T shows your consumption function. I bar minus BR shows your investment function, and G, that is government expenditure, is exogenously determined. If we want to define IS curve, we say IS curve is graph of all combinations of rate of interest R and Y that result in goods market equilibrium. That is, IS curve is a curve which is taking into account all those combinations of rate and interest and equilibrium level of income. What we can say? IS curve shows different combinations of real interest rates and equilibrium of output where goods market is in equilibrium. So if we want to say what is an IS curve, we say IS curve is made up of all the points where the rate of interest is equal to the equilibrium level of income. And what is equilibrium level of income? The equilibrium in the goods market. What is equilibrium in the goods market? That point where actual expenditure, that is exposed expenditure or the real GDP, becomes equal to the ex ante expenditure or the planned expenditure. So all the points on this IS curve represent that rate of interest and that level of income where there is an equilibrium. So let us see graphically that what do you mean by this IS curve. First of all, to derive the IS curve, we will understand the equilibrium level of income which we had already done in the previous lecture. And as we have just defined, IS curve is all locus of all those points where the rate of interest and equilibrium level of income remain the same. This graph will definitely help you people to understand and visualize that how this IS curve behaves. Now, in this first graph, we are seeing the 45-degree line which shows an equilibrium. Between why 45-degree line? Because in this line, all points represent that the planned expenditure is equal to actual expenditure. Then we see that R1 is the rate of interest. Let us assume R1 is the rate of interest in the economy, and this E is your expenditure line. So this, let us say, is your actual planned expenditure or actual which we are measuring. This becomes equal to 45-degree line and determines the equilibrium level of income, and hence you get Y1, which is the equilibrium level of output. So this blue dot of R1 and Y1 shows first point where this rate of interest R1 becomes equal to your equilibrium level of income Y1. Now let us assume that there is a fall in rate of interest. We have just seen there is a negative relationship between rate of interest and investment. A fall in rate of interest will increase investment, as you can see in this graph. When investment increases, this line E what will happen? It will go up, because with an increase in investment, your I will become this because there is a new rate of interest. So you see this happening. At this red line and intersection of the black line, 45-degree line, you get a new equilibrium level of income at Y2. You extend it, you get this Y2. Now if you see the second panel of this graph, you get two blue dots. One dot is representing the point rate of interest is R1 and equilibrium level of income is Y1. The other is representing rate of interest is R2 and equilibrium level of income is Y2. If you join these two dots, you will get a line, and that line is called as your IS curve. So what does IS curve show? IS curve shows all the combinations of the rate of interest at which there is a short-run equilibrium in the goods market. Okay, so it shows an equilibrium of the goods market, the income at the equilibrium level in the goods market and the respective rate of interest. So on this IS curve, there will be many combinations of rate of interest and equilibrium level of income. Maybe another case can be your rate of interest increases. If rate of interest increases, investment, what will happen to investment? It will fall. A fall in investment will mean your E line will shift downwards. A downward shift would mean you would have a lower level of equilibrium level of income. So it may be somewhere here. Okay, so high rate of interest means your equilibrium level of income is less. A low rate of interest means the equilibrium level of income is more. So there is, you can say, IS curve shows a negative relationship between rate of interest and the equilibrium level of income. And when the rate of interest is more, equilibrium level of income will be less. Now, let us understand again that why this IS curve is negatively sloping or downward sloping. We have just said that IS curve shows an inverse relationship between rate of interest and equilibrium level of income. Now, why does this happen? As we just said, a fall in the interest rates will motivate firm to increase their investment spending, and hence your E line will go up. In order to restore equilibrium in the goods market, which is output, which is also known as actual expenditure Y, must also increase. Then only there will be an equilibrium. Hence, at high rate of interest, the Y will fall, and at low rate of interest, Y will increase. So, IS curve basically is showing a high rate of interest reduces investment. Because of reduction in investment, and if you want to restore equilibrium in the goods market, we will see the actual expenditure changing, and you will see a negatively sloping IS curve. Now let us again see that what causes a shift in IS curve. This is very important later on when we will understand the working of monetary and fiscal policy. Again, we will be taking the equilibrium in the goods market on the first panel. So, E is equal to Y means this is a 45-degree line. Then, for example, the rate of interest is R1. You see C plus I, that is this investment at the rate of interest R1 plus let us say G1. So, you get a equilibrium level of income at Y1. So this point in this second figure given below shows that at this point there is an equilibrium in the goods market when the rate of interest is R1. Now let us assume that this particular, in this economy, R does not change, but the government expenditure changes. Government increases its purchases. So an increase in government expenditure G, what will happen? This E will increase. Because the G is increasing, E will increase. E increases, and if we have an equilibrium in the goods market, this Y will also increase. So let us see this graphically. This G has increased to G2. So you get a red line or your E shifting upwards. But for I the rate of interest is still R1. You get a new equilibrium level of income at Y2. Get this, there is no change in rate of interest, but we are seeing that equilibrium level of income has gone up from Y1 to Y2 because there was a change in the government expenditure. There was an increase in the government expenditure. So, in order to have this, you will see this IS1 will hence shift rightwards to IS2 because rate of interest is same but your Y has increased to Y2. So, IS curve shifts to the right. So IS curve can shift due to to the right due to an increase in government expenditure. IS curve can also shift leftwards or inwards if there is a fall in the government expenditure. So what we have understood in this lecture is that rate of interest and investment decisions of the firms are negatively related. Why these decisions are negatively related? Because an increase in rate of interest will increase the cost of borrowing for the firms and it may become less profitable for them to invest. So an increase in rate of interest will lead to a fall in investment by the firms. But a fall in the rate of interest will lead to an increase in the investment by these firms. So, investment is also a function of the rate of interest. Investments, we had said, is of two types. One was autonomous investment and other was induced investment. Autonomous investment is that which remains the same or it remains constant whatever be the level of output. It does not dependent on the rate of interest. Whereas induced investment was dependent on the rate of interest and we saw a negative relationship between the rate of interest and the investment decisions. Once we introduce the model of the investment function, we try to see that how that rate of interest impacts the equilibrium level of income or the equilibrium in the goods market. In order to understand the relationship between the rate of interest and the output in the goods market equilibrium, we derived a curve which is called as IS curve. So IS curve, we say, shows a relationship between the rate of interest and the output when the goods market is in equilibrium. That is, we take rate of interest on the y-axis and equilibrium level of output on the x-axis and then we try to plot this IS curve by taking into consideration the various levels of rate of interest and the corresponding equilibrium level of income. What we saw was that IS curve was downward sloping, showing at a high rate of interest, the equilibrium level of income is less and at a lower rate of interest, the equilibrium level of income is more. This negative sloping IS curve was because of the fact that at high rate of interest, the investments made by the firms are less. Therefore, people do not want to invest more, leading to a negative relationship between rate of interest and investment. So a negatively sloping IS curve showed that a decline in interest rate will push up investment. An increase in investment will push up output. Then we saw that IS curve also shifts. The shift can be rightwards or outwards or the shift can be leftward or inward. A shift in the IS curve essentially means that the rate of interest remaining the same, there is some exogenous variable because of which there is a change in the equilibrium level of output. The rate of interest was same but Y increased. Now Y or the actual output may increase because government expenditure which is exogenous has increased. Hence, we saw graphically that IS curve shifted rightward. Similarly, IS curve can also shift inside or inward or we call it as a leftward shift. A leftward shift can take place if, let us say, government reduces its expenditure. The actual expenditure done by the government reduces. a reduction in the government expenditure will lead to a fall in the equilibrium level of output. So same rate of interest, we may see a lower level of output. So any point on the IS curve shows an equilibrium in the goods market. That is, all the points on the IS curve shows that the rate or at given rate of interest, the goods market is in equilibrium. Any point outside or which is not falling on the IS curve shows maybe a disequilibrium in the goods market. Maybe at that time investment is more than the savings which we are doing, or investments are less than the savings we are doing. But if you are on the IS curve, it means that investment is equal to the savings. Also, all points on the IS curve show that for a given rate of interest, what is the given equilibrium level of income. So, in this model, we had not only introduced the interest's impact on investment, but we also saw that how does the IS curve shifts due to change in the exogenous variables. So friends, happy learning.